Welcome to Garden Delights. I'm Susan Howington, Family Consumer Science Agent with the Henry County Cooperative Extension, partnership with the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension. Today we're going to talk about squash, and I'm going to talk about winter squash. And to get even nitty to it, it's the butternut squash. And then you're also going to hear from Frank Hancock, our Agriculture and Natural Resource Agent. He's going to try to tell you how to get that fig tree ready by pruning it. So we'll see you back in just a little bit on Garden Delights. Welcome back to Garden Delights. Today we're going to be talking about winter squash. And you know, there's several different winter squash out there, but I have chosen the butternut squash. And you know, you see it in the grocery store, and if you've never tried it, you need to try it. It's not that hard to bake or cook with. The thing you want to look for is you want to just, when you're picking those squashes up, just look at them, see which one you might want to try. And as far as that nutrition goes, squash is really, really good for you. So winter squash, let's just talk about how good it is for you. It is loaded with vitamin A and C. It has a lot of good fiber for you also, potassium, magnesium, and it is low in cholesterol and saturated fat. Low in sodium also. So you can see you need to try that winter squash because it is really good for you on that nutrition. Now let's talk about buying it. So you're going to be buying at the grocery store, and you're going to see them out, you know, this time of year. And you want to make sure you're looking at them to make sure that the skin is pretty firm, because that tells you that winter squash is also mature enough to be picked, and it's also going to be the best as far as taste goes. And so you want to make sure the skin is firm. You also want to pick it up because the weight and what you feel is really important, because that's going to tell you that it's really filled out, because you want it, it's going to be kind of heavy feeling. That's what you want. And you're going to have different sizes you can get. Now this is on a small size for a winter squash, but you can get larger ones too. And so it just depends on what you're going to be baking with them and what you're going to be using them for. So you want no blemishes, no bruises, because if you see that, that's going to mean that squash is probably going to decay. Now, as far as how long can you keep this squash, that's a really good thing about winter squash. You can keep this winter squash for about 3 months, you know, maybe even longer, but you just need to keep it in a cool, dry place and just kind of keep an eye on it. So it does make a great decoration in your kitchen until you get ready to bake it, but it also needs to be stored in that cool, dry place, so you don't want to keep it any close to your heat. And so the good thing about winter squash is it does stay longer in your kitchen. So until you decide what you want to bake with it, that's a good thing. Now, this squash can be made into a casserole. You can eat it as is, and I'm going to talk more about how to prepare it. But just remember, it's so versatile on how you can cook with it, and it's really tasty, and you're going to get a lot of good fiber, is what we need in our diets anyway. So just remember, if you don't have a winter squash on your list, you need to put it on your list. We're going to hear from Frank Hancock, our Agriculture and Natural Resource Agent. He's going to tell you, or should be already telling you, how to prune that fig tree to get it ready for that fruit for the coming spring. So we'll see you back in just a little bit on Garden Delights.
Okay, today we're back up here with our fig bush. If you recall, a couple of shows back we talked about our figs, and we were having difficulty then getting the figs picked. We had to get a step ladder up here to try to get to them because our bush is a little bit overgrown. So today we're going to talk about how to prune the fig. I've got Erick Smith here with me. He is the small fruit specialist from the University of Georgia. He's stationed out of Tifton. He came up today to give us a little advice on pruning this fig back. So I'm gonna let Erick tell us a little bit about this. It's, you know, it's kind of growing out in the parking lot here, so we got to get that trimmed back, and we just generally want to get it back under control so that next year when we want to talk about figs, we'll be able to walk around it and pick them. So, Eric, I'm going to just let you tell us a little bit about pruning figs.
Well, thank you, Frank. I appreciate you having me up today. When we are growing figs in our backyards, we really don't want the plant to eat up a lot of space in there, and we want to be able to pick the fruit off of it. And if you're in South Georgia, you can probably grow a fig as a tree and get some shade out of it. But the further north you go, you want to grow it in a bush configuration because it has a tendency to be sensitive to cold and freezing. And these bushes many years ago were pruned appropriately for a bush configuration, but have not been pruned in a number of years and have grown to a point at which they've grown upwards of 15 to 20 feet high up there. And that makes it very difficult to get the fruit off of there. And so today we're going to use some tools that are appropriate for pruning, and we're going to show some pruning practices and techniques and things that you need to do to prune these so that you can have fruit that is accessible in a manner what we'd call a pedestrian orchard, so you can walk right up to the tree and pick the fruit right off of it. So the first thing we're going to do is we have some tools that we're going to use. There's the traditional using the bow saw and cutting it by hand and sweating a bit, and then coming in and having pruners to cut small cuts in there. These are little bypass pruners here, and then these pole pruners are larger bypass pruners here for larger cuts. And then once you get into a position where the wood is so large that it becomes very difficult to manage this, we've got a tool right here that all we have to do is just grab the branch and it cuts it with a bit of a chainsaw blade. And then for the larger cuts, if we're going to take some very deep cuts on there, we've got a chainsaw. And in all cases, when we're out here working, we should be thinking about safety. So the first thing if you're going to operate a chainsaw, have yourself some chaps, so you don't cut big holes into your legs if you make a swing and cut on there and it drops on you, or if the chain breaks off, it has something to bounce off of instead of cutting into you. Chainsaws are loud. We always have some hearing protection to keep our ears safe, and then definitely want to keep our eyes safe by having some eye protection. Then also, when you realize that a chainsaw is a two-stroke motor, so you're going to have two-cycle gasoline engine to go inside there, and you also should have your bar oil inside there so that you can keep that chain liquid, the oil on there, so that it can keep the chain sharp over time.
It's also important if you're going to use a chainsaw, if you've got a chainsaw, chainsaws are supposed to make work easy, and so your chainsaw needs to be serviced. It needs to start when you pull the rope. It needs to be sharp so that it's bringing out nice chunks of wood. If you got a chainsaw that's putting out sawdust and you're having to do a lot of work to get things cut, you need to work on your chainsaw because chainsaws are to make life easier, not make you have to work hard trying to use your chainsaw. And I see a lot of folks in a homeowner situation that have got chainsaws, never been sharpened, never done anything, and it's like you know, you might as well be using a pocket knife or something trying to cut some of these branches off. So keep your stuff serviced.
And then one last thing, when we're in here working, we're going to be wearing our gloves all the time and also our eye protection all the time. If you look inside the fig, there's lots of little branches that are sticking out, and the potential to stick yourself in the eye is pretty high. So we really suggest that you wear some safety protection so that you keep yourself in top physical shape. Okay, so we're going to go in and we're going to make some cuts.
Explain to us a little bit, Eric, about the approach that you want to use here. Let me let you get over here next to the tree and just tell us what you see here.
So if you can look into the tree, or the bush actually configuration, this fig has been trained as a bush. So you can see that there's a number of leaders that are coming out directly from the ground, and it is meant to have an open and a large canopy that comes out. And this is what they call a bush configuration. If it was going to be in a tree, you would also have a single trunk with branches that are coming off. But this one is being grown as a bush. When we take a look at this, there is a lot of wood that is sticking out far and away from the center of this. So that makes very difficult for light to get down into the center of the plant. And it's important to get light into the center of the plant because that's where rejuvenation shoots will come out. And on those rejuvenation shoot is where you're going to have fruit borne. And so it's very important to get that light in the center and have that bushiness in a compact form. Because this one has gotten so out of hand, we're going to come in here and severely prune this to where we make it a pedestrian size. So the average cut is probably going to be at about a 5-foot height on some of the main leaders and then even lower. As you can see down in the bottom of this, some of the shoots have come out and touched onto the ground and have been covered by the ground. And from there, we have other plantlets that are coming up, and that's called layering. And so the bush is actually creating more bushes as you look inside the canopy. But because it's in shade all summer long, when the leaf canopy is on here, that's very weak wood and it's not very productive wood. So what we want to try to do is get a balance in this plant so that we can have high quality, easy to pick fruit, and you're not competing with all the birds and everything. The other reason we want to draw this back down into size is because it can get extremely cold up here to a point at which it can cause freeze damage on the plant. If you have a plant that is, you can come out and put a tarp over the top of it and maybe put an incandescent light bulb underneath there to keep it warm, you can save a lot of that wood on that plant during real cold times. And we have just gone through a week where we had very low temperatures and even snow, which is somewhat rare for Georgia, and especially in South Georgia where I hail from down in Tifton. We had some snow. Okay, so we're going to come in here and do some pruning cuts.
All right, well, why don't we just get ready here and we'll just go to work, and if we see something we need to stop and talk about, we can do that too.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the bow saw here, and what I want to show you is, if you can see in here, how the architecture of these branches are coming out here. A lot of people, when they make a cut on a branch, sometimes they leave these large pieces out here. Well, what's going to happen is that piece of wood is just going to die, and that's an excellent place for insects to move in and start making galleries and homes inside there. It's also an excellent place for disease to come in. So if you can get these cut as close to where the branch is coming out of here, there is a natural process at which the fig itself will heal itself, and it'll send out sap and it will save its wood, and then that will be an excellent point at which the cut itself isn't endangering the plant and creating more problems for them. So I'll give you a look with this at first. And so that's the angle at which we want that cut. We want a nice flush surface, very close back up to where the wood, where the branch came apart. Then when we have smaller branches like this, and a lot of times you find that these are dead, at any time pruning out dead wood is very important, because that's a potential site for diseases to set off into the plant themselves. Want to prune that off?
We'll probably just take that one off with this. And you can see a bush this big, if you're going to do all the pruning with your bow saw, you'll be in pretty good shape when you get through. So we've got some other tools here that we'll use as we go along and get this thing shaped up. I'll let you just point out to us what you want to do next, Eric, and we'll just prune it back.
Okay, so this little tool right here, this Black & Decker, is a really nice tool to get larger cuts. So I don't know if you can see into here where I'm at, but there's a number of branches that are in here in which all of these are creating quite a tight canopy, and there's no light coming in here. You can find some smaller branches that have been trying to come on, but some of these are dead and rotting, and that means that there's just not enough strength in those branches to come back into this. So what we'll do here, in order to try to bring in some light in the bottom, is we'll start to pull off some of these larger branches. Now this does two things for us. It helps us get into the canopy now. We don't have a lot of material in our way. And now we're going to just go ahead and we're going to clean up this plant. And so the next thing you probably see is a very shortened version of what's sitting right here right now.
We're back here with our reduced size fig bush. I didn't mean to make Eric work so hard. You know, we had to take his jacket off so he could finish up. Tell us a little bit about what's going on here. Now, we left a few branches on here, so we'll put out some early leaves and just explain to us what we're doing.
So my thought is these are some very old limbs in here, and over the next few years, you're going to have to start taking each one of these out. And you'll see some of these younger shoots that are coming up in here from last year. Now those are going to become very productive and they're going to be very vigorous this next year. But you still need to put some shoots on here and get some leaves onto the plant. Leaves can help conduct water through the plant. And so I left a few branches that had some leaves on there so that those leaves can come out early in the spring and start conducting water through here, and that'll help the vigor of the plant. For the most part, we took out all the dead and damaged wood. We found the older branches and took them down. We tried to bring this thing down to where at least eyeball height on me, which is probably about 5'8". And what we wanted to do in here is make it so that I can start pulling out these larger pieces of wood with new renewal shoots every year. So figure over the next 4 years, you'll be taking one of these out and you'll be cultivating and working with these. Prune the tops and keep it to height. Don't let it just start growing straight up into the air like it did before, and keep it into a condensed bush. And this way you can have figs that are at hand level, and you can also tarp it in cold weather.
Okay, and I think what we're going to do now is we're going to go back inside and see what Susan is fixing.
Welcome back to Garden Delights. Today we're talking about winter squash, and today I'm also going to be talking about the butternut squash, and that's what I'm going to be using to bake with. Now the butternut squash, like I said earlier, the skin is pretty firm, so you're going to need a really good knife to cut it open. So I'm going to just tell you a couple of ways that you could use the butternut squash as far as to bake to get to this recipe that we're going to be using today. So when you're using the butternut squash, you do want a pretty sharp knife. You want to cut the both ends off of it, and then you can cut it in half, and I will tell you the rind of this butternut squash is pretty tough. So there's options you can do. So what I chose to do was I cut mine in half, and in the center part, where's the center part of the biggest part of the squash, not the long neck part of it, but down at the bottom. That's where the seeds are going to be. So when you cut it open, there's no seeds up at the top part. They're going to be down here, and so you're going to have to scoop them out. But those seeds are also edible too, and you can roast them. So really, you're almost able to eat the whole part of that squash. So you're going to cut it open. I did a little bit of olive oil on top of the butternut squash. Once I opened it up, scooped all the seeds out, and you lay it down on a cookie sheet. And when I say lay it down, I just took a paper towel and rubbed just a little bit of olive oil on it. I sprinkled a little bit of salt and pepper, and I laid them down, and then I baked them. And so you can bake them for about an hour. And then you can just scoop it out, and that's what I did to make the mashed up part for this recipe. Now, if you don't want to do it that way, you can also peel the rind off and you can cut it up into chunks, and you can cook it either the chunks just as is, or you can put them in water if you want to boil them that way too. But I wanted to keep as much nutrition in that, benefits of that nutrition from that butternut squash, so that's the reason why I chose to bake it. And it was so easy because then you just scoop it out. I will tell you this, that when you are peeling a butternut squash, it also has like a green, kind of a, I don't want to say a rind, but it's in between the meat of it, the flesh of that squash. And so you want to make sure when you're peeling it that you get the green part off, because you don't want any of that. That's going to be really tough. It's not going to taste as good. It's going to be stringy too. So that's what I want to make sure you understand when you're doing this. So for the recipe, it's going to call for 3 cups of smashed or mashed potatoes, of the squash. And so in order to get that amount, it's going to take either larger ones than this one, because this is on the small side, so you probably want about 3 of them, because you're going to use every bit of that to get the smashed up part of it. So once you get that, then you're going to take it and you're going to smash it up. So you want a mashed up look just like this, and I use my potato smasher, and this is what it looks like. And if you want to, if you want a little bit more creamier, you could also put it in your food processor and also do it that way too. So there's other options out there that you might want to try. So for the recipe, it's very, very simple, very tasty, and it's just something new that you might want to try as far as in your recipes. It's very, very tasty and very good. So what you take is the 3 cups, and then you're going to add, this is sour cream, and you can add fat-free or you can add light to it to make it less calories. But for about a half a cup of smashed or mashed potatoes like this, as far as with the potato masher, this is going to be about 63 calories. So it's not very many calories. So also in the recipe, it's going to tell you need about a half a cup of finely chopped onion, and you're going to saute it in a little bit of margarine. So I've already sauteed the onions, and I'm going to add it also to this ingredients. And the other part it's going to tell you to add, it's going to add you to get a little bit of salt and pepper. So this is about 1/4 of pepper and about a half a teaspoon of salt. So we're going to also put that in there. And if you're watching your salt intake, you could leave it out also, because I did sprinkle just a little bit of salt and pepper on the squash just before I baked it too. And this smells so good. The onions, I can really smell them. And so you just want to mix this up really, really good. And the sour cream just gives it a really nice texture, taste to it, adds a little color to it. So it's just different from just the plain old squash. Now, butternut squash, you can cut it in half like I was talking about. And you can eat it just like it is. You can put it on someone's plate as is, even with the skin. You don't want to eat the skin, but the skin will be on the other side of it, and you can lay it on somebody's plate. You can also, because it has that little insert where the seeds are, you can also stuff it if you wanted to also. So there's so many options out there that you could try with that butternut squash. So that this is mixed up really well. So what I'm going to do, you need about a quart-size container, and you want to just spray it because it does help it from sticking. So I'm just going to spray it just a little bit. And then also, I'm going to add this to the casserole dish. If you want to make more, if you have a crowd and you want to have more of this, then you're going to have to cook more of the butternut squash. So like I said, about 3 of them. This was like the small size. So if you get larger ones though, it's going to make more. So it just depends on how much you want to make. And also, these make really good pies too. So, if you haven't tried it, you need to try one. So I'm just going to push this around in the casserole dish. And you can see it's going to fill it up pretty nicely. And it smells really good. And it's not really stringy too. You think about sometimes I think about pumpkins and other things that are really stringy, and it's really not a stringy squash, you know, as far as like a pumpkin, so, or any other. And I know like squash, in the summer squash, you can eat the rind, but you can't eat the rind for this. And the last thing it's going to tell you for the recipe is just to sprinkle just a little bit of nutmeg on top. So I'm going to do that, and this smells really good. So we're going to sprinkle just a little bit on top, give it a little bit of color, give it a nice taste. And then what you're going to do is put this in your oven at 350, and you're going to bake it for about 35 to 45 minutes, depending on your oven. And it also depends on how much you're making, because this is a 3 cups of the smashed butternut squash. So you want to make sure, you know, if you have a bigger one, you may need to cook it a little bit longer. So what you're going to do is put this in your oven, bake it, come back and check it maybe in about 35 minutes. But on the average, it's about 40 to 45 minutes. And it should be just a little bit of brown on the outside, and the top a little bit of brown, and you're ready to go, and it's going to be so tasty. So when we come back, Frank and I will be tasting this gourmet golden squash. See you back in just a little bit on Garden Delights. Welcome back to Garden Delights. We have, Frank, gourmet golden squash.
All right, you know, I was just thinking it would be good to have some gourmet golden squash after we've been out pruning that fig bush all morning.
I know, and
Just on my mind.
that's a good thing to have on your mind. Food is always good to have on your mind. So let's just taste some of it. I was telling everybody how easy it is to prepare, and so now is our time to try it.
That's good. It looks good too.
It is really good. You can taste the nutmeg, but you can also taste a little bit of the sour cream, which you didn't know it was in there, and it's a little bit of onions, but not a whole lot.
I was about to say all that.
I know you were. It's really tasty. And it's different from just a summer squash. Very creamy too.
I recommend it.
It's really good, really, really good. I'm about to take one more bite. Well, I'm glad you got the fig tree prune.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna have to go back up there in the spring, and we'll cut a lot off of the fig, but it needed it.
And I'm looking forward to the fruit.
We'll go back in the spring and take another look at it.
That sounds really good. Check out the recipe on the website. You're going to love it. And Frank and I will see you next time on Garden Delights.
Don't forget what they always say.
What's that?
You already forgot.